Hello, welcome to another episode of Varsity360. I'm Columbian sports editor Micah Rice, joined this week by Tim Martinez, and it is state basketball week. I think it's one of my favorite weeks of the entire year, and there's a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about a couple of the pairings. We're going to talk about reflecting on a busy weekend up in Tacoma that I was at Mac Classic. But first of all, I was really interested to read your column on Wednesday offering up some ideas for a new format in the state tournament. And what a better time to talk about new formats for the state tournament than when we're right in the middle of the storm. So how you feeling heading into this week?
So I was, we were busy last week, and we went to a lot of different games and events and basketball games. And in the course of the week and being out at the games, I was, talking to some of the administrators at 80s and whatnot. And we were kind of kicking around ideas about the state basketball tournament, even though it's actually been 15 years since the last time the state had a 16-team double elimination bracket at the same site. So whether that's the Tacoma Dome or the Yakima Sun Dome or Spokane Arena, 2010 was the last year that we did it. It was kind of, when I went back and found out, I thought, well, it's been a long time. And it always seems to come up this time because people who are old enough to remember we'll think back to those days when 32 teams from the 4As, they went and they played at the Tacoma Dome for 4 days, and they want to bring that back, but it was eliminated back in 2011 as a cost-saving measure because basically the WIA was able to cut their rental costs for those facilities in half by moving to the format that we have now. So we were playing around with ideas, and I was driving back on Sunday morning, and I was thinking about this, and so I came up with an idea that that we can talk about today, that would potentially bring back that 16-team tournament without adding any significant, and certainly no more rental costs at the final sites, but that could work out a little bit better. Yeah,
before we go into that, let's set the stage for what the format is now. As it is, you have 16 teams playing in the state tournament. You have a seeding committee basically putting those teams into two brackets. You have the top 8 seeds, which are guaranteed passage, win or lose, to the final site, that being Tacoma for the 3As and the 4As, and Yakima for the 1As and the 2As. If you win that round or that opening round game and you're a top 8 seed, you go straight to the quarterfinals. Pass go, collect $200. If you lose, you're still live in the round of 12. However, if you are a seed 9 through 16, and we're not even going to get into the 3A stuff, which is an expanded 20-team tournament, but most simply, if you are a seed 9 through 16, that first game in the opening round is a loser out. You could make the state tournament, but lose and won and you're done, and you don't get to go to the final site in Tacoma or Yakima. So what is your new format, and kind of how would that stack up against the format as it is now?
Yeah, so the format that we have now, and it has changed a little bit over the years, but it's basically the same format that we have now that we've had for the last 15 years. There's two wrinkles to the format that we have now that always kind of bug me. The one wrinkle is because you have these split brackets, it is possible to lose a state playoff game and still come back and win a state championship, which in the previous format in 2010 and earlier was not possible. Mm-hmm. You lose, you went into the consolation bracket, you're playing for 5th place or 4th place or 3rd place. So that always kind of bugged me a little bit, and it doesn't happen very often, but it did happen last year. In the 2B girls division, Napavine lost their opening round game. They were a number 1 seed. They lost to the 8th seed in the opening round, and then came back through the round of 12 and quarterfinals and semifinals and won the state championship. So it's possible. And the other thing about it is that it also makes the possibility of rematches, which again doesn't happen often, but it did happen last year with the Camas girls. They opened at the regional or the opening round in Battleground and beat Gonzaga Prep. And then they came back a week later and played for the state championship game against Gonzaga Prep, because Gonzaga Prep worked back through and got back there. So looking for a format that kind of eliminates those two things and kind of creates a stage that could possibly bring back the old format. So my idea would be that you see the teams like as you do 1 through 16, and in that first round you would play it straight up. 1 plays 16, 2 plays 15, 3, 14, and on the way down. And the way it would work is you would do this in 2-year cycles. So in the first year of the cycle, all of the 4A games, boys and girls, those first round games, they would be played at the Tacoma Dome on Wednesday. And that's, with just a first round, you win, you advance to the quarterfinals, you lose, you're done. The 3A games would also be played on that Wednesday, but would be played at high school sites in the Tacoma area. So like, Mount Tahoma, Stadium, Lincoln, Silas. There's lots of high schools they could play there. Play them and I picked four different sites because that would allow 4 games to be played in the evening, which wouldn't disrupt things that are going on the school day. You can play from 3 o'clock on and play those 4 games. So the winners from those first games on Wednesday, whether they're at the Tacoma Dome or at these sites, would advance to the quarterfinals. Those are back at the Tacoma Dome, and the tournament follows the same format it follows all the way through. And you could do this again in Yakima, and you can do it in Spokane. That was one of the things that we were kicking around ideas. Is like some of the ideas we came up with would work in Tacoma, but wouldn't work in Spokane, or it's got to work for everyone. So that's sort of the basic of it. And the other thing that this idea could potentially bring back if they wanted to. So one of the benefits of bringing everyone to the final city site is everyone gets to go to the final city site, whether or not they actually play at the Tacoma Dome or Sun Dome or Spokane Arena. They're at least there. And so even if you don't get a chance to play on the Tacoma Dome, you can still go to the Tacoma Dome and watch games. It's like if you bring a young team of sophomores and freshmen and a couple of juniors, and you play and you lose, but you go and watch, you can kind of say, this is what we're playing for. You're here, you can watch, you can take in the environment. This next year we can come back and this is our goal, kind of thing. So they get a little bit sense of a taste of what that Tacoma Dome atmosphere is all about, which in the current format, people, if they lose this weekend, then they get ready to start playing softball, track, and everything else. So the other idea that this would create is that you could take those same 4 off-site gyms, and you could take Wednesday's losers, both in the 4A and the 3A, and have a consolation round games played at those same 4 gyms. And so they can play those 4 gyms, consolation quarterfinals on Thursday. The winners could play consolation semifinals on Friday, could probably reduce it down to 2 gyms. And then on Saturday, the winners of the Friday games could play for 5th place back at the Tacoma Dome, which is the format that it used to work when you had a 16-team tournament. So there's time in the schedule to allow for that to happen, because they used to do that. They used to play the 5th place games, and then the 4th place games, and then the 3rd place games. And then they play the championship games on 2 courts back in the day. Today, they play the 4 championship games, 3A boys, 3A girls, 4A boys, on 1 court. They bring it down to 1 court. So utilizing both courts, you could make that happen and make that work. And so if you decided to play that, again, play that consolation bracket, now you basically brought back the 16-team double elimination bracket back, and you're also providing 4 more teams the opportunity to play on the Tacoma Dome. Right now it's 48. Yeah. 48 get to do it. There's 12, 12, 12, and 12. My format, it would be 16 and 16, and then the other classification 8 and 8. And you can change that up if you wanted to. I mean, if you decided that you wanted to say, okay, well, the top 4 seeds in 4A and the top 4 seeds in 3A, they're going to play at the Tacoma Dome, and the other ones could play offsite. You can change it up however you want. But if you came back with that consolation, that 5th place game on Saturday, you would increase the number of teams that could go and play on the final sites from 48 to 52. Which is not 64 as it was back in the day, but we're getting closer.
What I like about that is that it eliminates the one and done possibility. It always seemed a little odd to me that you could say we made state, but we were done after playing in a high school gym. We had to travel to, let's just say, Davis High School in Yakima, and we lost and our season's over. And that was the extent of our state experience, where in this case you could lose that first game. It's like, okay, well, we can't win a state title anymore, but there's still something to play for. We can work our way through the consolation bracket. We're still, we play whenever on Thursday, and then can go and watch some of the Knights games in Tacoma. And we're still playing for that. Maybe we can work our way into under the big roof in Tacoma or Yakima if we kind of do what we need to do to rally and work our way through the consolation bracket, which is always one of the more fascinating things. I mean, how many times have we seen a team kind of go out and be a little unsure, not know how to adjust that first day? Maybe they're a little nervous, but then they find their rhythm and end up placing and getting a trophy because they worked their way through the consolation bracket. This would offer that opportunity to more teams, other than you have a bad day this weekend on Friday or Saturday and you're done.
I also haven't studied, the travel factor, but it kind of feels like if you're sending everyone to one central site, it feels like you're going to save on travel. I mean, because if you think about like the Kingsway girls, right? Mm-hmm. Kingsway girls, they're going to go to Yakima on Friday to play in this opening round. So this weekend, they're going to travel all the way to Yakima, and then they're coming home. And if they win, well, then they got to go turn around and go back to Yakima again. Yeah. The Camas boys, they've got a guaranteed spot at the Tacoma Dome, right? Mm-hmm. That's a 5 seed. They're going to go to Richland this weekend, and then they're going to come home, and then they're going to go to Tacoma. Mm-hmm. But if you had used my format, they would just be going to Tacoma.
Yep, fewer miles.
So it feels like, even though some of these I think the original format of these they were originally called regional games, mm-hmm. and now they've kind of separated them farther out there where there's not so many sort of pods of games being played this weekend, that it kind of puts a lot of travel on some of these teams. Prairie in the round of 20, the boys, they got to go all the way to Spokane on Tuesday and play. So it kind of feels like if you kind of centralize it, you also maybe save on travel.
That's true. What are some of the, playing devil's advocate, what are some of the pushbacks to this format? Certainly, one reason I could see to stick with the format as it is that it adds more importance, I believe, to the regular season and to the district tournaments, and that you do have a seeding committee you're trying to impress. And if you kind of have a rough spot in the regular season, that can affect your seeding. And so it puts more onus on trying to be consistently good throughout the regular season. And then it really puts an onus on, Camas, both boys and girls can probably speak to this. There's a big difference whether they win those bi-district championship games last weekend in Auburn with how the seeding committee is seeing them versus if they lose. If Camas boys win on Saturday, they're probably playing here in the area as a top 4 seed versus having to travel as a 5 seed. So wouldn't you say that if you take that element out of it, that it kind of minimizes the regular season and the district tournaments? Maybe a little bit. It still affects where you're seated at and who you'll match up against and potential matchups down the road. I think the original format that we have now, how that started back in 2011, was back then we didn't have seeding committees. Right. It wasn't seeded by RPI. The bracket was kind of, randomish in nature. It was basically the number 1 seed from this district is going to play the number 3 seed from that district, and the number 2 seed from this district is going to play the number 4 seed from there. And it was just kind of piecemeal together. And so I think they originally came up with this sort of separated bracket so that, because they were limiting the amount of teams, because originally the format was they went from 16 teams playing at the Tacoma Dome down to 8, because originally it was they would play these regionals on Friday, Saturday in a pod where you had the winners and the losers, and then they would play again on Saturday. So Friday, the original format was you had the top seed teams playing at a site on Friday, and you had the bottom seeded teams playing on a site on Friday. The winners would go to the quarterfinals. The top-seeded losers would play on Saturday against the winner of the loser outcome. So it was basically the same format, except they moved that Saturday game to the Dome on Wednesday. Yeah. And I did that in 2017. But the first 5-6 years, it was all played on the weekend preceding. So I think they wanted to create this sort of format that
depended less on the seeding coming out of the district and more on teams sort of winning their way into the dome. But I think now we've kind of advanced. I think we went to RPI for a while, and that had issues. And now we got a seeding committee that I think, by and large, is doing a pretty good job of sorting out the teams and how it is. And so I think that I don't think we need that extra layer of defense to make sure that teams are in the right position, and that we can kind of get back to just doing a straight 16-team bracket again.
And the other pushback point I heard is, well, you make it to state and you're playing in a high school gym in Tacoma or Yakima. What's the fairness in that? To which you say,
right, yeah. Well, you're playing in a high school gym now. Like that was the statement with like one of our colleagues at the office. He goes, I found one thing. He goes, like if you're a 3A team that first year and you're playing in a high school gym while all the 4A teams are over in the Tacoma Dome, they're like, oh, well, that's not fair. To which I say, you're playing in a high school gym now. You're playing it now on Fridays and on Saturday this week. In most cases, it's a high school gym. There's a couple of junior college gyms that are hosting, but otherwise, it's basically a high school gym. So the situation you're in now, you're playing at a high school gym. So, you're just moving it to the final destination site in a high school gym. And it'll alternate in 1 year from the next. And again, you can also, like I said, stack it up where you're playing 4 4A and 4 3As at the Dome, and the other ones have to play off site. But I just kind of think like I think I think there's the desire to bring back the old format. I think this might be the closest we're going to get back to that old format. I don't think that format's coming back unless you had a huge influx of money, either a major sponsorship deal or some very wealthy donor. Because basically the WIA budget right now, basically half of their expenditures are on hosting state tournaments, and half of their revenue is on state tournament tickets. And so right now it's pretty balanced. And so they don't want to add to that, the expense part of it. And this, because the gyms are high school gyms that are member schools, there would be a minimal cost effective thing going on. And I'm sure there are probably other issues that I haven't quite thought through or figured out. And I think any solution at this point, or any suggestion or any change, 4 years ago in 2020, they had a committee study and they had a couple different, format changes that were rather dramatic, and ultimately they decided to just stick with the format that we had. So I think any suggestion, any change is going to have drawbacks. And I think what you're looking for is the one that has the least drawbacks, or the ones in which the benefits outweigh the drawbacks. And I'm kind of thinking I think this idea could potentially lead to a better solution.
Before we move on to the pairings, final question on this topic. How quickly do you think we might see some serious discussion or possibly movement on this?
Usually something like this, it has to sort of, be discussed by the executive board of the WIA, and then they usually form a committee, and then the committee comes back and they formalize. So it wouldn't be something that would happen
soon
next year. It'd probably be something, at best 2 years away, maybe, the next reclassification cycle. I know it's also, there are probably other factors and schedules and things that have to be into consideration, but it's something to consider.
Absolutely. All right. Well, let's go to this weekend's action. There's a lot of good stuff happening, but to see any of it in person, you're going to have to hit the road. The closest games are happening at Mark Morris High School in Longview, and those are in the 3A girls, the 2A boys, the 2A girls. And I guess let's start with those games. First of all, what's going on first? Is it, number 2 R.A. Long, I think, is going to be the headlining act, if you will, at Mark Morris High School, and the Lumberjacks get that bid as the number 2 seed with a 22-1 record. They take on number 7 Foster. R.A. Long, I mean, they've just put together a fabulous season.
Yeah, and some people might have seen the brackets, and I did this as well on Sunday. I think we've become so used to seeing Battleground as being a host site year after year after year, and you're probably wondering, well, how come Battleground's not hosting? And this year is a little bit different than in many past years, in that there was not a Clark County team in the top 4. And in past years, we've had teams that are top 4 seeds, and so they like to keep those top 4 seeds as close to home as possible. And so we didn't have any from Clark County And RA Long being a 2 seed, that sort of becomes the anchor for that Mark Morris Regional. So basically, District 4 down here, they throw out some different sites, Battleground being one of them, Mark Morris being another one. And so RA Long is the anchor, and everyone else plays up there at RA Long. So RA Long, they had a great season. They have a great run. I'm interested to see how they do this weekend and how some other matchups happen. If there's one sort of unknown about RA Long, and this is probably true of all the 2A Greater St. Helens League teams, is a lot of the teams in the 2A, in the boys in particular, did not play anyone from outside of District 4 all season long. RA Long played 6 non-league games. They played like Aberdeen, Seton Catholic, Fort Vancouver, Kelso, Tenino, and one other team. They haven't played anyone. They didn't play anyone from up in the Tacoma area. They didn't play anyone from central, Washington. They didn't play anyone from up in Northwest, the Lindens and up there. So it kind of leaves that 22-1 is like, well, what does that tell us? I mean, they could be very good or maybe not as good, So are the other teams up north or east could be, we just don't know because we haven't had that crossover yet. And so it'll be this weekend will be very, very interesting. It'll be interesting to see how Mark Morris does against number 1 Linden and other matchups across the board. So RA Long definitely, I think, was deserving of that 2 seed. They did everything that they were supposed to do. Their one loss was to River?
Columbia River.
River at River.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they did everything they had to do and earned their way. So it's kind of now we get to see how it matches up.
We don't know much about RA Long statewide. What we're about to find out, which is the beauty of the state tournament. Well, you said RA Long is the anchor. I called them the headliner, and that's because they are the final game in 4 games on Saturday at Mark Morris High School. The action starts at noon with number 11 Mountain View girls taking on either number 19 Garfield or number 14 Shorecrest. Again, this is the 3A tournament. They're a little wacky in the 3A where they have 20 teams in that tournament. So you're going to have preliminary round games, or they call them the opening round, on Tuesday. And then officially this is the second round, round two.
Yeah.
But good story for Mountain View, getting that first state berth in 24 years?
24 years.
24 years. And this is, I think, just a really interesting Mountain View team to watch, in that they have some really good backcourt in the Sanderson sisters, and then Sveva Bernasconi, who is, the new arrival, who has established herself as one of the top players in the area, can kind of do a little bit of everything. And so I'm really interested to see how Mountain View does, because they've had some great performances, but then they also had a couple of performances in one performance in the bi-district tournament to River Ridge, where probably they should have won that game, ended up losing in overtime. So I'm going to be curious to see whether the Thunder can flip that switch and go into playoff mode.
Yeah, I was at their game on Friday up at Bellarmine Prep, and in that first quarter, it was kind of like, ooh, this is not going very well. Bellarmine Prep was they had a size advantage on the Thunder, and they were leaning into that and really sort of controlling the paint and controlling the tempo of the game. But second quarter, Thunder turned it on. They made an 8-0 run. They hit some shots. They got some confidence going. And really from there in the second half, they opened up a lead and kept it the rest of the way. So it was really an impressive win for them. And Bellarmine Prep was the 3 seed coming out of the West Central. So that's a team, like, I think last year they were a 4A team, and I think they ended up playing, I think they played Camas pretty tough in the bi-district round last year. Obviously a different team, but so they have the sort of the lineage there, and so it was a good win. And I was also impressed because we've seen some of the 3A Greater St. Helens League teams, both boys and girls, in this 20-team bracket, and they usually end up playing Tuesday. They end up in that 13 and above. They end up playing a Tuesday game, like what Prairie's going to be doing. So I was like, when I saw that they actually got the 11 seed, which means that they is it the 11 seed that's there? Yeah.
Yeah.
The 11 seed.
Thunder are the 11.
So that means they don't have to worry about Tuesday. They just got to play on Saturday, and And so, yeah, it'll be an interesting matchup, see how they do.
Well, that kicks off the action at noon. Coming right on the heels of that at 2 o'clock, Woodland Girls. An interesting team in that they had a really solid league season. Obviously, they have some really nice pieces, primarily Kennedy Bockert, the great junior, kind of multifaceted player who's a walking double-double machine. But then they ran up against a buzzsaw in the district tournament in WF West, who is playing as well as any team in the state right now. And so I was curious after watching that game against WF West, kind of what sort of character would the Beavers show in sort of dusting themselves off and putting that behind them. And they certainly did that, winning a winner to state, loser out game this past weekend. And that has the Beavers as the number 9 seed going up against number 16 Sultan, 2 o'clock at Mark Morris. And always interesting that 8, as a 9 seed, you can say, we just missed a number 8. But you could also say, well, if we're number 8, we know we're playing in the round of 12, but we're going on the road against, number 1 seed, in this case, Linden, who is, just a juggernaut. Is it maybe even better for the Beavers to be that number 9 seed, to be playing close to home against a number 16 Sultan team that if you play your best, you're probably going to win, and then you're in the round of 12 anyway?
Yeah, it's it's kind of like the situation they have between league rival Columbia River, right? The league champion, right? So Columbia River was the 7 seed, which means they got to go to Ellensburg. They got to go play in Ellensburg. Well, I think they played that last year, right?
Last year, and they lost
8-1 last year. This year it's 7-2 seed. So they have to go up and win a really tough game on the road. And so would you rather be in that boat, knowing that you got your ticket punched to the round of 12 the next week, or are you rather be in the Beavers spot where they get to play the 16 team, which theoretically is a winnable game for you? You come in with the win, and you're in that round of 12. So, maybe this is an opportunity for the Beavers to reestablish some confidence and get a good win, and then head off to Yakima next week with a little momentum with that winner to state game, and then the winner to the round of 12 game.
And then it continues after that 2 o'clock game. We hit the floor again at 4 o'clock with the Columbia River Boys. And Columbia River Boys have always been just really interesting all year to me. A team that when they're shooters, Aaron Hoey, Ari Richardson, John Reeder, they just have so many pieces that when they're working together, they can be a really dangerous team, as they showed in handing RA Long their only loss of the season. But then there's been some other games throughout the course of the league season where they dropped a narrow one to Mark Morris. I think that game went to overtime, if not double overtime. And then they lost a competitive game to RA Long. But the Rapids are the number 11 seed, and they're going to play number 14 Renton, 4 o'clock at Mark Morris High School. And I think this Columbia River team, if they can win on Saturday and make it to Yakima, they're the type of team that if they get hot, they can be playing for a trophy.
Yeah, they definitely can. And I think being at Mark Morris for this opening round it's familiar territory. They play there every year. So they know the gym, they know the surroundings. They're playing a Renton team with a not impressive win-loss record, but Renton plays a lot of really tough teams up in the Seattle area. So don't get too thrown off by the win-loss record for Renton. It's still going to be a good game, a tough game, a good test for River. But again, an opportunity for the Rapids to win their way into Yakima and maybe get something going.
All right, and then that quadruple header will end with the main event at 6 o'clock at RA Long. And we're not going to get to every pairing here today, but a few of us are going to go on the road this weekend. I'm going to be taking a trip up north. You're going to be heading east. Why don't we just kind of talk about some of the things we're going to be looking forward to in the games that we're going to see. I'll go first, and what I'm going to see 2 games, and the first one I think is really interesting because it's number 5 Union Girls against number 4 Woodinville, and I'm interested in this one because it is the first state game in a few years for the Union and the first game in the state tournament for Brooklyn Haywood. And we talked about how it's a good thing that Union has advanced to this point, because then the rest of the state now is going to see this prolific scorer that we've gotten to know over the past few years here in Clark County.
Yeah, the seeding coming into the 4A girls was kind of interesting. I was talking with the folks from Camas before their bi-district championship games up in Auburn, and the consensus that they had even going into that game is that the paper makers, Camas, which ended up being the 7th seed, they thought that 5 was probably where they were going to slot. They kind of felt like the top 4 seeds were in good positions to get the top 4, which was like Davis from Yakima, Lake Washington, Chiawana, and Woodinville. And so the way it worked out is that one shot, a last-second shot by Auburn to beat Camas, basically, I think flipped Union and Camas. Basically, I think if Camas wins that game, then they're going to be in this 5 game, and Union slides back either to 6 or maybe 7. So it kind of feels like, in a way, that Camas's win over Union last Wednesday, it kind of like got wiped off the board a little bit. So it was a little bit interesting to see how that all kind of shook out. But yeah, this is an interesting matchup between Union and Woodinville. This is Union. The other thing we were talking about Union falling out of the top 4 is like, here's a team that's 21-3.
Yes.
Right. They lost in overtime to the number 1 seed, AC Davis, and then they lost twice to league rival Camas. So I mean, those are 3
not bad losses.
At all, and their two of their losses are against a team that they beat twice.
Yep.
And then the other one was an overtime loss to the number 1 team in the state. So this is going to be a really, really interesting matchup, and a chance for Union to say, hey, we think we probably deserve to be in that top 4, and if things hadn't gone differently on last Wednesday at Camas, maybe they would be. And it's a little bit chance for them to go on the road too. That was the other thing that Gary Mills, the Union coach, talked to me last week. He's like, the way the bi-district tournament worked out, the format this year changed. Usually it meant you would play 1 at home, and then you would be up into the Tacoma, Puyallup area playing games the rest of the tournament. But this year, the way the bracket worked, they played the first 2 at home, and then they ended up playing Camas in the semifinal, which they played at Battleground. So because he goes, I've never remember going up and playing in this tournament and playing 3 games and never leaving Clark County. So the good thing is they didn't have to travel. The bad thing is they don't get that experience of going on the road and playing a playoff game. And so this is that chance for them to go up to Bellevue on the road as a team and get a big win, and that'll help move them into the quarterfinals and probably put them on a good path. Potentially even a rematch against Davis. Once they get the dome. So
number 4 Woodinville, number 5 Union, 6:00 at Bellevue Community College on Friday. That's going to be a great opening round game in the state tournament. And then from there, I'm heading even farther north to Mount Vernon, where I get to see the Seton Catholic boys, number 6 seed going against perennial power, number 3 Linden Christian, 4 p.m. Saturday at Mount Vernon High School. This game is really interesting to me because of all the teams that we kind of had our radar on that could go to Yakima and make some noise. The Seton Catholic boys kind of stood out, being that they made it to Yakima last year. They're basically bringing everybody back from that strong junior class last year that are now seniors. You're talking Rico George, Brady Angelo, Lance Lee, Mason Glassmeyer. I apologize if I'm missing any of you seniors. But then you also have the Trico League Player of the Year and sophomore Caden Wilson, who has continued to evolve his game. And I'm really curious to see how Seton, which kind of, took on a lot of tough non-league opponents early in the season before rolling through the Trico League undefeated. How are they going to do against the caliber of team that is going to place really high in the tournament in Linden Christian? And if they can go up north into, the far reaches of I-5 before it hits into Canada and take on and be competitive and even win against a Linden Christian team, I think that bodes really well for the Cougars heading in to the Dome in Yakima. Now, they might also get a reality check because Linden Christian's really dang good. But either way, I think we're going to learn a lot about where Seton stands at this point, headed into the final 12 and maybe even the final 8 of the state tournament.
Yeah, I think the Cougars would probably say early in the season they weren't playing their best.
Yeah.
And so there were a lot of factors. They played a very difficult schedule. They maybe weren't playing their best. And then they had a couple of players who arrived late because the football team did so well. So a lot of early factors that kind of got Seton off to a slow start, but they've really been rolling since. But it's against that sort of the same factor issue as like, now they get to go outside of their home base to go play some good teams. So this again will be a good test for them. They got the experience under the dome last year. They can feed off that and build off that, and hopefully that experience helps them against a very talented Linden Christian team on after making a very long trip.
All right. Well, we'll end our look at the pairings by looking at a couple of the games you're going to see as you head east. And thank you for raising your hand and taking that assignment, being that Meg and Will are going to be in Tacoma the following week, and I'm going to be in Yakima for the small schools. Those are long weeks. So you're like, I'll be fine hitting the road, but you're going to cover a lot of miles.
Yeah, a lot of miles and a lot of games. 4 games in 2 days. I'm going to start on Friday night in Yakima with the Kingsway Christian versus Wapato at Davis High School on Friday night. Kingsway girls are the number 14 seed, and Wapato would be, 3?
Yeah, and that gym is going to be packed. Wapato turns out.
Is that right?
Yeah.
So it'll be unfriendly territory for Kingsway. Actually, no, they're not. That's an upper bracket, a lower bracket team. So that would be, I don't even know what the seeding would be. What's with 14 and.
Well, it would be it would be
11?
14 and 11.
14 and 11. So anyway, it's going to be a long trip for Kingsway. Kingsway's a good team. They've got some good players, some younger players. Some seniors on it, and so this will be a good experience for them and a chance to advance on to the Yakadom in some unfriendly territory. Then on Saturday, I get 3 games. It's going to start back at Davis High School at noon on Saturday. 1A girls. That will be Seton Catholic versus Zilla, and that's always going to be.
Talk about teams that turn out. Zilla.
Yeah, they're going to go. So the Seton's the number 6 seed, coming off a district championship. Coach Phil Kent said that the District 4 always goes through Monty, and this year it went through Seton Catholic, and they went up and knocked off Monty in the title game. So Cougars are really playing well. They're playing with a lot of confidence here over the last month of the season. So they're going to need all of that as they head up to Yakima on Saturday. And then after that game gets over, I'm going to scoot down, I-84. What is that, 84?
82.
82.
Yeah.
Down to the Tri-Cities, head down to Richland. 2A boys, Richfield will take on Prosser at 6 o'clock on Saturday at Richland High School. And then will be Camas at Richland,
which I think is going to be a great game.
Yeah, at 8 o'clock, and that was a game where Camas feels like if things had gone well at the bi-district title, maybe they hit some more free throws and win the bi-district title, then maybe they're playing over at Battleground this weekend. Instead, they got to go to Richland and play on Richland's floor against a 23-1 game team, and so I kind of chance to sort of. Camas to rebound and get back in and hopefully advance to the quarterfinals. It should be. I think it should be a wild environment the whole weekend over there in Central Washington.
Well, it's going to be a great week. But before we end this episode, let's take a look back to last weekend and an all-new, bigger than ever Matt Classic. I was there in Tacoma. First of all, shout out to all of our state champions, all of our placers, and all of our qualifiers from the area that made it to Matt Classic. They really opened up the doors to the tournament this year. 64 wrestler brackets in the 4A, 3As, and beyond. And then 4 distinct girls tournaments, 4A, 3A, 2A, and 1A and below. It made it for just a overwhelming expanse of wrestling over 3 days, but it was a little different. First of all, some of the good things I think about this weekend. Number one, it gave obviously the spotlight to a lot more wrestlers that might have been overshadowed if we were under the old format. And under the old format, you have all the state title matches happening on Saturday evening, and it certainly made it from my perspective where in the old way format, I kind of had to pick and choose what wrestlers to focus on. This year, with 3A and 4A finals happening on Friday and the 2As and 1As happening on Saturday, I really felt I could invest some time and emotional energy in seeing the wrestlers that were wrestling for state titles on both of those nights and really learn their stories. And certainly on Friday, the big story was Faith Tarrant becoming the first 4-time state wrestling champion from Clark County. Just the, at the time, we had 3 girls over the course of the weekend in Tacoma achieve the status of 4-time state champion across all different classifications there. But Faith Tarrant at the time became the 24th wrestler in state history to become a 4-time state champ. And then that same night, you had JJ Shaneline becoming I think the 5th or the 6th 3-time state champion from Clark County. Anyway, the first since C.J. Hamlin 4 years ago. Just an amazing end to the career for that great wrestler from Skyview. And then the DeRochers twins, who are sophomores. They won their 2nd state title and keep the dream alive to each become 4-timers, which would just be insane. So that was some great storylines on Friday. The down part about Friday, we were still wrestling at 11:30 at night, which you can look at a bunch of different factors for that. Did they take too long of a break between the morning and afternoon 2A, 1A preliminary matches, and then clearing the dome and then setting the stage for the finals that night? Could they tighten that up a little bit? I don't know, but it doesn't serve anybody to be wrestling that late at night. Not the least of which is that a lot of people had gone home by the time you were having your 235-pound state championship match with Faith Tarrant. Really a event that I wish everybody in the dome could have seen, but it also made a late night for me. Not to put it, I'm not the one who matters here, but I was finishing up at about 2:30 or 3 in the morning, which was rough.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking. We become so used to the format in the past where the finals would start at 5 o'clock and they would typically finish around 8 or 9 o'clock. Yeah. And so, I was at my hotel finishing up work and video editing, and I was on our website around 11:30 or so, and there was nothing from Mike. I think you had posted some results up at 3 o'clock, and there wasn't anything, and I was worried that maybe you had, drove into a ditch or something.
I was dead, so figuratively.
It wasn't until I got onto social media and I saw, they were still wrestling at that hour. I think when they change formats, I think their priority the WA is going for is they're looking for a better environment that benefits the participants, the kids, and that's I think that's the number one priority for them. And then the next priority is, does it make for a better experience for the fans? Because they're paying the bills to come in. And then I think the next priority comes down is just, does it work for like the schools to be able to support their kids, either as administrators or student body coming out. And then way down on the list is how it affects the media. Yeah, in fact, they don't. And
I'm not. Don't view this as complaining. I'm just kind of giving you my perspective from the reality I experienced. But it was a long and late night, and
so I think in looking at those priorities, I think they wanted to make it a more special event for all of the participants and those who became champions and stuff. But, pushing it so late, it kind of like the gains, and then there were drawbacks to it. And so I don't think it really helps. We've been at volleyball state tournaments that go on till midnight and stuff. I think that's something they're going to look at and try to get that better. I think I was talking to folks from Camas the next day, and they were there the previous night, and they were like, yeah, it was a cool environment, but man, was it late.
Long. But we'll end on a couple more positives. Number one is that by having now separate 3A and 4A girls tournaments, I think it opened the door for 2 amazing wrestlers who happen to be in the same weight class to each be honored as state champions, and that's Faith Tarrant, obviously, and then Madison Cardens at Skyview, also a state champion at 235. it would have been kind of a bummer if, like, well, Madison Cardens, she's obviously a state quality wrestler, but she just happened to be at the same time in the same place as perhaps the best girl wrestler ever to come through Southwest Washington, perhaps ever. But with the new format and the new 4A tournament, Madison Cardens was able to win a very competitive tournament there and achieve a state title, which I think is great. And then also, like I alluded to before, it allowed Saturday to really be about the small school wrestlers that might have gotten overshadowed if they're wrestling at the same time as the 3A and the 4As. So I got to know the story of Connor Crum, Seton Catholic sophomore, who's kind of on our radar because of how well he had competed in some of the tournaments around here, the Pat Coast and the Clark County Championships. Turns out he's a state chess champion too, and I kind of got to talk to him about how he uses a chess mindset to approach, a wrestling match where he's thinking 4 or 5 moves ahead. How am I going to set up this thing I'm going to do down the road by what I do now? And he became a state champion there on Saturday night. That was also the case for Lessen senior Isaac Cromie, who had gotten 4th, then 3rd, and now ends up as a state champion, gets to do a backflip. Basically, the entire La Center wrestling team was Matt's side going crazy. That was a real cool experience. And then 3 girls from the 2As, a couple from Washougal, Aaliyah Vargas and Victoria Nicasio got to share in their joy. Vargas just put a cap on an amazing senior season where she rolled through the regular season and the postseason, entered as the #1 ranked wrestler, and just dominated the state tournament. And then Victoria Nicasio, a junior, who's actually the 3rd Nicasio to come through. Her 2 older brothers wrestled at Union, but little sister is the first to win a state champion. And then shout out finally to Cooley McReynolds of Woodland for also getting that elusive state title as a senior. So when you widen the tent, you get more people in to share in the bounty of a bigger MAC Classic, and I think that's a net positive at the end of the day.
And I think it's a net positive, even from our standpoint. It's like, it was a long day, and you were, up until the wee hours of the morning doing all this work, but you're able to get these stories. Yeah. Where in a normal format, you a lot of times at the state championships and state tournaments, a lot of times we have to pick and choose. We have to make decisions about who were we going to interview and who are we going to chase down stories and get photos and videos and stuff. And so being able to spread it out, offered the opportunity for us to get more of those stories. So from our standpoint, that's an added benefit, and we'll take the longer hours and the late nights and stuff. It's kind of the same thing with the state gymnastics. In the last couple of years for state gymnastics, they moved it the week after wrestling and swimming, and that made it easier for us to get out to it. And then this year we kind of had to sort of pick and choose because they moved it back. And I don't know if that's because of the calendar or the space availability, site availabilities, or what. I think when the WA kind of spreads those events out, it certainly makes, I think it easier on the fans to be able to get out and watch all these things. Makes it easier for us to cover. In the fall, all of the state champions are like on different weeks, from slow pitch softball to cross country to volleyball to swimming to soccer to football. And then the winter, it's a little bit bunched up. You start with the bowling, and then it's the swimming, wrestling, gymnastics, and then basketball. And in the spring, it all just kind of culminates in, this year they kind of broke it up into 2 different weekends. But normally in past years, it was all finishing on the same weekend, or the same week. So, spreading it out is not a terrible thing, although, it doesn't come with some hiccups.
Well, we're going to go work some more long hours, cover some more long distances, and hopefully get some more great stories this weekend and the week beyond. It is state basketball season. It's one of the best times of the year. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for following along. You can certainly follow all of the teams as they try to make their way through the brackets of the state basketball tournament this weekend and the following week. We'll see you next week. I'm sure we'll be back to break down kind of what we expect to see in Tacoma and Yakima next week. But thank you for following along, and we will see you next week.